Hello viewers and learners, Namaste. In the second part of my lecture regarding feminist theory in international relations, I am taking the feminist perspective of international relations, which was explained by J.N. Tickner. Generally, J.N. Tickner's views were given lot of weightage, lot of importance in international relations. It is also part of various curriculums. That is the reason that I am devoting this part of the lecture to J.N. Tickner's views. She has written an important book, Gender in International Relations, Feminist Perspectives on Achieving Global Security. It was written in 1992. Her approach to the study of gender in international relations may be classified as standpoint feminism. This variety of feminist scholarship argues for the construction of knowledge based on the material conditions of women experiences that gives us a more complete picture of the world. So standpoint feminism basically argues that those who experienced some things or those who are at the margins, right? So those who have experienced something, they can explain those things better. So the kind of sufferings or the kind of exploitation, right, that they have faced or they have experienced, if you allow them to express them, it will give you a complete or a more better picture of the world. Her work on gender is designed to pave the way for the transcendence of gendered inequality in theory and practice of international relations. So most of her work, it focused to transcend gender inequality in international relations theory and practice. It means that somewhere her primary goal and objective is that international relation, it should develop as a gender neutral discipline where women's views, their perspective, their interpretations, their theories, right, their experiences, they should be given adequate space, right, and their voices should be heard. They should get proper, adequate representation. So she primarily focuses on this thing that the gendered inequality, which is persisting, which is part of IR theory and practice, it should not be there. Tickner's work must be situated within the context of the rise of identity politics and new social movements in the late 1960s. So if you want to trace the work of J.N. Tickner, then you can trace it and relate it with the rise of identity politics in the world. So feminism here can also be seen as an identity, and the new social movements of late 1960s, which also gave rise to what is now known as second generation feminism. Tickner has argued that women have knowledge, perspectives and experience that should be brought to bear to the study of international relations and attacking the many ways in which men's experiences are projected as if they represent some universal standpoint. So here Tickner particularly questioned the realist assumptions primarily, that the experiences of the men or the observation or opinions of the men, they have been presented as something which is like universal in nature, right, as if they are representing the complete reality of international relations. But Tickner here argued that females, they have their own knowledge, they have their own perspective and they have their own experiences that must be given adequate space and respect in the field of international relations. Tickner also analyzes how the major Western traditions of realist, liberal and Marxist thought have all drawn from culturally defined notions of masculinity, emphasizing the value of autonomy, independence and power. So here she has questioned all the three dominant traditions of international relations. Realist traditions, that was primarily opposed by all the feminist scholars, liberal and Marxist thought also. So generally we believe that liberal and Marxist scholars, they are more closer to say feminist school of thought or feminist perspective regarding IR. but Tickner has questioned them. She said that liberalism's atomistic individualism, instrumental rationality, and focus on the market economy, they are based on male experience. It means that even free market economies, capitalism, individualism, right, or the rationality in liberal societies, in democratic societies, even they are based on male experiences. Even their female experiences, they are not included. On the other hand, she has also criticized Marxist scholars or Marxist scholarship because Marxist, they focus on class and cancels how gender divides labor and power, not only in public sphere of production but also in the private sphere of reproduction. So Tickner, she has also questioned Marxist scholarship on the ground that Marxist scholars, they give a lot of importance to class, but within class they fail to acknowledge that gender, it acts as a kind of division between labor and power, right? And this thing is reflective not only in the sphere of production where male and female, they are differently rewarded, right? They were paid differently, but also in the private sphere of reproduction where females get no adequate benefits or say even leaves when they pass through that reproductive cycle. National security is threatened more by domestic and environmental disorder. So, Tickner has argued that national security is not limited to the boundaries, right? And national security is not only threatened by some neighboring country or by some rising power or by some established international power. Rather, national security is also threatened by domestic and environmental disorder. She argued that attaining peace, economic justice, and economic sustainability is a kind of inseparable part of the project of gender equality. So if you want to achieve gender equality somewhere in international relations or in the concept of national security, you have to create a space for peace. You have to create a space for economic justice. You have to create a space for ecological sustainability, right? In a way, you can even say that the negative side of war and conflicts needs to be highlighted because they are not only destructive for people, for human beings, they are also destructive for nature. So they disturb the ecological balance, they disturb environment, right? So they have a very intense destructive capabilities. So if you talk about war, they have very intense destructive say impacts that destroy the natural balance. J.N. Tickner presented a very powerful critique of realist scholars. Primarily, she focuses on Morgenthau's principles of political realism. And there is a particular reason that why she focused on Hans de Morgenthau's principles of political realism. Because Morgenthau's 6 principles of political realism, they represent one of the most important statements of contemporary realism, from which several generations of scholars and practitioners of international relations have taken inspiration. Apart from other critiques, Tickner has argued that she is not going to argue that Morgenthau is incorrect in his portrayal of the international system. But she said that I do believe it is a partial description of international politics because it is based on assumptions about human nature that are partial and that privilege masculinity. So here Tickner, she said that she is not questioning the overall premises of Morgenthau. Rather, she is questioning the very interpretation of human nature that he has given, right? And he has given a very partial description of international politics because since it is based on human nature, it is partial in nature because primarily Morgenthau gives a privileged position here to men's roles, characteristics, in human nature. Here it is necessary to define masculinity and femininity. According to almost all feminist theorists, masculinity and femininity refers to a set of socially constructive categories which vary in time and place rather than to biological determinants. So there are certain feminine characters and there are certain masculine characters, right? And these characters are socially constructed. So they have nothing to do with the biology of male and female. Rather, these are socially constructed categories. It means that certain values, certain characteristics, right, they are associated with males and females, and based on those characteristics, they were largely viewed. And that is also true about international politics. It is important to note that these characteristics are stereotypical. They do not necessarily describe individual men or women who can exhibit characteristics and modes of thought associated with the opposite sex. So there are exceptions, right, in terms of characteristics. It is just like not all the males loves violence, right? Or not all the women are submissive, passive, right? So these qualities and characteristics of males and females, right? They are relating. They are they are not specifically limited to any particular person, right, or any particular gender. There are certain key focused areas on which J.N. Tickner focused. First is, she argued that knowledge is socially constructed, so objective laws of human nature can't be objective, rather they are culturally constructed. So Morgenthau, when he talked about human nature, right, and the knowledge that he produced regarding human nature, the argument that he has given, Tickner argued that since knowledge is socially constructed, right, Morgenthau's interpretation about human nature, it cannot be objective because it is also culturally, socially constructed. Second important thing is that redefining power and national security, right, it is very important. So military, economic and environmental security, it is actually interdependent. So here, usually power and national security. So whenever we talk about power and national security, we primarily talk about military security. But Tickner argued that we need to redefine power and national security. And we need to accept this thing that military security is very closely linked and associated with economic and environmental security. In fact, they are interdependent. So you cannot imagine or ensure one without having the other. To question and change the immoral realm of international power politics. So Tickner was also focusing on changing the amoral character of international power politics. She was also inclined to present a feminist perspective of international relations. Apart from that, she has also argued that non-violent resolution of conflict is very much possible, right? So rather than relying solely on wars or conflict to solve a particular problem, there can be non-violent means available if the states, try to explore them, right? So if the states will try to explore different non-violent means, then probably wars can be averted, conflicts can be averted. One such method that she highlighted comes from Sarah Ruddick's work, Maternal Thinking. Ruddick describes maternal thinking as focused on the preservation of life and growth of children. So maternal thinking, which is primarily a characteristics of female, right? It primarily focuses on conserving the life, or in a way you can say that it is constructive in nature rather than destructive. It focuses on nurturing, it focuses on growth, right? Growing of children. Now, J.N. Tickner, she was also interested, and she has reformulated the 6 principles of political realism given by Morgenthau, and she has reformulated them to so that they could be more comprehensive, and they include also the feminist perspective of international relations. The first reformulation is that objectivity is culturally defined and it is associated with masculinity. Therefore, supposedly objective laws of human nature are based on a partial masculine view of human nature. So here she argued that the objective laws of human nature that has been presented by Morgenthau, they are actually not objective in nature, because objectivity is culturally defined. So rather, they are based on a partial masculine view of human nature. Second reformulation, or the reformulation of Morgenthau's second principle, is that national interest is multidimensional and contextually contingent. Therefore, it cannot be defined solely in terms of power. In contemporary world, it demands cooperation and mutual gains. So when you talk about national interest and you suggest that there is a particular way and there are certain means to achieve those national interest, she questioned that. She said that national interest is also multidimensional and it is also contextually contingent. It means that in all kind of situation, in order to preserve or protect your national interest, you need not necessarily use the same kind of means or to indulge in war or adopt the same kind of approach, right? Rather, national interest should also be seen in the sense that you can secure or protect your national interest by cooperating with certain states, by entering into alliances, by entering into some kind of bilateral or multilateral exchange where mutual gains can be ensured. The third reformulation is that power cannot be infused with meaning that is universally valid. Power as domination and control privileges masculinity and ignores the possibility of collective empowerment. The fourth reformulation is she rejects the possibility of separating moral command from political action. She said that all political actions, it has moral significance. It means that every action of a state, it has a moral significance. So you cannot ignore morality, you cannot ignore international morality. It means that states, when they have to deal with other states or when they have to achieve their national interest or when they practice their foreign policy, or when they indulge in any kind of exchange with other members of international community, they should always take care of morality, because every political action, it has a moral significance. So morality cannot be ignored. The fifth reformulation is that there are certain common moral elements in human aspirations which could become the basis of de-escalating international conflict and building international community. So generally it has been argued, Morgenthau argued that there is a difference in case of the morality of an individual and the morality of a state. So for state there can be a different kind of morality, right? For state the morality may lie in primarily focusing or achieving its national interest. For an individual, a person may sacrifice his self for the sake of certain moral values, right? He may sacrifice some of his aspirations, goals, right? But that is not possible for a state. But J.N. Tickner here argued that still there is a possibility of having certain common moral elements where commonly there can be certain moral values that will be practiced and followed by all the states in the world, and they could provide a positive basis, or they could bring a change and help in de-escalating international conflicts and war. They may also be helpful in building an international community which will be based on peace, mutual cooperation, right? Where countries, they can indulge in various kind of cooperative activities. They can start some organizations at the regional level where they can start exchange programs, indulge in trade and other bilateral, multilateral activities. So common moral elements can help the international community in reducing tensions and preventing wars. The sixth important reformulation is that a feminist perspective denies the autonomy of the political, since it is associated with masculinity in Western culture. So Morgenthau has argued that IR should be seen as an autonomous discipline. Now feminist scholars, they have questioned this autonomy because they believe that this autonomy is based on some partial interpretations of international relations. So they have argued that the political autonomy or the autonomy of international relations that has been demanded, it is largely associated with masculinity in Western culture. So in the Western societies, the male perspective which is dominating, or the male interpretation which is dominating, or which are like various institutions or states, including states, where they are represented by the males. So when you demand that kind of autonomy for a discipline which is male centric, right? So if you will give that autonomy, if you accept that yes, that particular discipline is autonomous, then you also somewhere acknowledge and accept the masculine character of that particular discipline. So feminist scholars here question this particular thing, that it cannot be done, right? So this particular discipline, it cannot be given an autonomous status because it is partial in nature. So in the two lectures, the lectures that I delivered today, so it is divided into two parts. So in the first part, I have given some generalized interpretations and observations by feminist scholars regarding the biased nature and masculine character of international relations and foreign policy, and how women are not given proper representation, right? Their voices are not heard, and their observations are not included, and they are not part of, in a way you can say, the larger international community of scholars. In the second part, I have given importance to the views of J.N. Tickner, where she has questioned the realist premises, and her standpoint of feminism also allow her to see international relations and question its masculine characteristics. But like all other approaches of international relations, the feminist theory of international relation is also not complete. It is also not universal, and it has also been criticized. And it has been criticized on a number of grounds. For example, some of the scholars, they have argued that it is giving importance to just one particular element, right? Or one particular dimension of international relations. For example, you are judging everything from a gendered perspective, right? While there are many social realities, so any action at the international level which is taken, or the behavior of the state, or any particular policy, or even foreign policy, whatever a state may adopt. So there are various factors that played an important role. So everything cannot be seen from a feminist angle, or cannot be seen from a gendered angle, right? Apart from that, some scholars, they have also questioned that the feminist scholars, they couldn't provide a kind of convincing theory, feminist theory of international relations. So that was also one of the allegations. There are some other limitations also. So through feminism, you cannot interpret international relations in totality, because there are many factors, as I said, at the international level, not just socio-cultural factors or factors which are relating to identity. So there are many other factors, economic factors, political factors, that play an important role in international relations, and any one particular factor is probably not sufficient to explain the international reality in totality. Over the years, due to the impact of feminist theory or feminist perspective regarding IR, a number of things have changed at the international level. For example, in many countries, you must have seen that now females are getting more representations. So they are becoming heads of state, they are becoming presidents, prime ministers. In the diplomatic community also, the acceptance of female, it has increased. Now females are also representing various states at the national and international level, particularly at different bilateral and multilateral forums. You may find that a number of women these days are representing their states. There is one more very interesting thing here is that in terms of political representation, generally we assume that Western societies, they are more fair. But in reality, in many African states, women are better represented in comparison to Western societies or Western democracies. Now this trend is growing. Here we can even take the example of India, where recently women, they also get commission position in Indian military, right? And this kind of trend it's a global trend. So around the world now, the acceptability, inclusion of women in military services or even in combat roles in Air Force, right? It is being accepted. So one of the most important contribution of feminist theory of international relations is that it is making international relations or international politics a more balanced discipline, right? A discipline that incorporate the views of both males and females, that is based on fair representation, that gives fair representation to males and females, right? And which is presenting a more balanced view. And it is also giving an alternative perspective to some of the most dominant say arguments of international relations. So feminist scholars, they have questioned realist scholars. Now realism is the most dominant school of international relations. So when they question some of their core premises, and also gives an alternative that they can be seen from a different angle, right? And they have presented, as I said, some alternatives in the sense that suppose if you have to achieve your national interest, which is the primary goal of every state, there can be various other means. So not necessarily you have to go the realist way, right? And women, they can play, because of some of their innate characteristics, they can play a more constructive role in establishing a more balanced, peaceful, stable, progressive and developed world. Thank you.